So from what I understand so far, the means of asset protection and operation in the private result from members operating under private ministry or foundation. Can't we accomplish this same thing with a private trust, or is the religious aspect of the foundation another level of Kevlar? That's a great question. I like the way you say Kelby style. So that's 100% accurate. And I'm only making this assumption based on court cases. And you look at the element of a private trust, and here's the debates that I've had with attorneys and people that don't understand private versus public and trust law versus church. So everything inside of the way that we live our lives across the board, it's all pretty much trust law. The adhesion trust, the driver's license states the grantor, states the beneficiary, you're the trustee, you're the only one signing on the agreement. There's no countersigned agreement. You get to hold a card in your hand. You know what I mean? Driver's license, voting, all SSI, all the same thing. 1040s, tax returns, you're the only one signing. And that's important to understand because there's no contract. There's no contract there. It's no offer, acceptance, consideration, performance, full disclosure. So when you're looking at the element of a foundation or a private ministry, that element does trump a private trust from the standpoint that a trust is like a level 4, but it's also something that is pierceable, not on the private side. I mean, it's still workable, but the element of it being a church is indisputable for a lot of different reasons. For the constitutional reason of you being a minister, I need you to read the Constitution, and you'll understand that you have diplomatic rights as a minister. For the element that it is a church, it's private, it's not public, it belongs to God, it doesn't belong to man. Man just stays away from it. And who is the IRS or who is the federal government to determine what a church is, what belongs to God or what doesn't belong to God? According to the Revelations 5, it all belongs to God. He purchased the entire title deed to the earth. And there, I had some chips right before. And everything on the earth, not just your souls. And this is a common misconception at the cross. It's done. So in understanding that, yes, you can use a trust, but there's a lot of sneaky guys out there, judges and people out there that may want to come and try to pierce the trust. And it's up to you, because even in a private trust, there's people out there that'll come in and say that's really you, and that's you're just operating through that trust, and let's take a look at that trust, and then I'll get the judge to make some kind of subpoena or some kind of order that you bring documents in, you bring your bank accounts in, and you don't know any better. You got an order, you got a trust in your hands, and you bring everything in, and they say you understand that this isn't a proper trust, that you're falling under our jurisdiction. Boom, 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 and you're like, yeah, and you give. So you can fight the private trust just like you can fight the church, but the element of it being a church is unpierceable. The element of it being a trust is unpierceable, but with the perception that they can come and nail you on trust law violations or trust rights violations, or the elements of the trust being in proper form. And so I don't even want to mess with that. And don't get me wrong, we do trust for people, but it's you as the ultimate trustee of that trust, with the highest form of contract on the land, according to the Constitution, that has to hold the trust above the court and keep the court out of the trust business. Because as a trustee of the trust, you have a fiduciary to the trust to keep the trust information private, because it's private, it's not public. And we do have a letter for people that are struggling in that regard, where they go into court and then court makes an order, and we have them submit a letter, and they're able to deal with the court in the element of it being private, and that they have a fiduciary and an obligation to a higher form of law, which is the trust law, which is a man's right to contract with another man, and no court can pierce that. Do people let it be pierced? Yes. Have I seen a foundation or an SSM pierced? Not one time. Have I seen one brought into court? Yes, because the guy let it get into court. Did we get it out of court? Yes. So I just like the element. I mean, this is a long-winded answer, but I like the element of being a church and knowing fully biblically that God owns everything on this earth. And people, there's a lot of people that don't want to hear that. I don't really care. I honestly don't care. When you die, you'll figure out you own nothing. Okay. And so just take that principle and that element of understanding. You're either pledging it to a structure that's demonic, and meaning you're registering it, an LLC, a corporation, whatever it is, your property in the county recorder, whatever it is. You're putting something in, you're handing it over, your cash, your gold, and you're handing it over for deposit, for credit on account. All right. And when you make your deposits at the bank. So you're giving your stuff over anyway, right? Well, that's not what we do in the living in the private. We want to keep it all for him. And we want to be the fiduciary. And guess what? Man's law protects that constitutionally, Supreme Court wise, IRS rules, you name it. So just give it to God and watch what God does through you, and roll. Private trust is great because you can still have the elements of a foundation and security. It's just a little less. But watch this, put it in a foundation, create your operating agreement within the foundation, dedicate it to God, get your statement of faith done with us. We then produce the docs. We then are basically, authorizing, not authorizing, that's the bad word. We're saying this is a good, these are good people. This is a good church to open up, and just honor God with it, with the money that you're going to save, because you're not pledging it to a bunch of darkness. And because if you follow the money, it'd be pretty demonic, where you ended up in this world on the taxes you're paying.